Paul Carden here from the Wirral Residents Association. We are a local community interest group. This proposed solar complex is a huge site. It's 37 hectares and that's equivalent to 67 acres. Or in layman's terms, it could be described as 38 football pitches, which, as you can imagine, is absolutely huge.
What's your views, Charles, on these solar farms?
There are a number of views, different reasons why I'm against solar farms. Firstly, if we're selling land and we need economic food security, why are we then putting solar farms on them? Secondly, if we're having solar farms, it affects the natural habitat, and that's a reason why a lot of people live in this sort of area. Thirdly, what is the benefit to the local community from having this solar farm? Nobody's been saying anything about that, and I think, you know, overall it's been set up by a Chinese company, which in this day and age, I think if we don't have a British company that's going to be doing it, then why have we got a Chinese company doing it? So those four reasons would be the reasons why.
If approved, it's a foot in the door on Wirral for the Chint Solar, a Chinese multinational company that's got absolutely no local connections. It does have operations in Europe, but now it's branching out further and into the UK. So they are complete outsiders and they're basically here to make a profit, really. So I have to tell you, there's a bit of activity going on in the background here, in the shadows. Some local landowners have leased part of their land on Station Road, Thurstaston, and this is the same site as the solar complex company. Now these landowners have leased part of their land to a telecoms company, On Tower UK Limited, in 2023 for 10 years. And it looks likely that a similar deal may have been struck already with Chint Solar, the Chinese solar company, to cover the rest of the land.
They're not other than an eyesore, that's the first thing. So they take up countryside and make it look like something it shouldn't be. I'm not convinced about the arguments as to whether or not they're actually effective in the long term. They cost an awful lot of money to put in, and they only last a limited number of years and then have to be replaced. I'm not sure anybody's ever explained to me quite how they become financially viable anytime soon. So I'm not against them if they're placed in if they are financially viable and they're placed right. But if they're talking about Thurstaston or somewhere here, then I can't really see that's a good idea. I wouldn't be in favour of it.
The Wirral Residents Association have made a very important discovery recently. Chint Solar have submitted papers to Wirral Council. These are scoping and screening requests. They're 116 pages long, but nowhere within this are battery energy storage systems mentioned. The development itself cannot function without battery energy storage systems. And I believe the reason this was omitted is because of the fire risk, the explosion risk, and the risk of toxic fumes being released if there is a fire. And that includes carbon monoxide, which is a killer. There was an incident a couple of years ago in Liverpool where a similar battery energy storage system exploded, caught fire and burned for 59 hours. So once these things catch fire, it's very difficult to put them out. And once one battery catches fire, the rest of them come out in sympathy and you end up with a huge blaze. And the incident in Liverpool was just 4 shipping containers with banks of batteries. Here in Thurstaston, it's likely to be 12 of those shipping containers. So if there was a fire, it could be even worse. Another risk associated with these solar complexes is that if they're not installed correctly, toxic chemicals can leak out into the soil and destroy the farmland.
Well, I can see the common sense in it, but I think if we could be subsidised, have our own solar panels and create our own energy, then that would probably be a better proposal, putting a blight on landscape and fields. And I think you're referring to the ones at Thurstaston, aren't you? I think that's it's a bit of a bad show, because once it's built on, isn't it? It's land grabbing.
Land grab is what it is. I mean, I believe that you've been campaigning for the farmers also.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they're getting a terrible ordeal. I think the people, that so-called leader that we have down in London has really done a bad thing, and he's trying to. There's certainly an agenda, and people just aren't seeming to grasp it. People are too glued to the mainstream media, and when you bring them to certain channels on YouTube, such as Maya Tusi, for example, well, they're not controlled by Ofcom. Well, it's Ofcom which is controlling the media, and I learnt the other day that the government can put a certain notice in such that mainstream media can't report certain things, and this is why we have a society where people just do not know.
Now, at Wirral Council, our councillors are non-specialists. They're not engineers. They're more likely to be pen pushers. But these are the people who need to be asking the right questions, not just ticking the boxes. I'm an electrical engineer, and I've got to admit I'm not an expert on solar developments, but I do recognise the anomalies when they come up, and I recognise straight away when I notice that battery energy storage systems had been left out of this application. I think they'll probably try to insert it later.
I think it's going to be terrible, because Thurstaston is a beautiful place for walking dogs, children to play, having a walk if you're just generally wanting to go for a walk, especially in the summer on a sunny day. It's a lovely area, and it's just countryside, and to put that there, it's catastrophic. That's my opinion.
Moving on, this land is part of our local heritage, and potentially it could have historical artefacts which are waiting to be discovered. It's only a couple of miles away from here in Hoylake. In 2007, under the car park at the Railway Inn pub, a Viking longboat was discovered. Now this thing is about 30 feet long, and it's preserved in blue clay. And these artefacts could be lost for the next 30 years or even longer. There's also lots of listed buildings in this vicinity, and this development just doesn't fit in at all with the local surroundings. And it's also between two local conservation areas, Thurstaston and Caldy. You've got to admit that house prices are going to be adversely impacted. There are some very expensive properties around here, and the people living in these houses could have tens of thousands of pounds knocked off the value of their houses. Then there's the local ecology aspects to this. We've got bats, we've got migrating birds, and already we know that there are great crested newts living in the area. And these great crested newts live on the land. They've lived here for centuries, and they breed in the local ponds. So all of this is going to be impacted, and hopefully our councillors will be there to point this out. Chint Solar, the Chinese solar company, will have to satisfy a very detailed environmental impact assessment. But even if they do, we have to stand strong and say no. 3,000 people have already signed the online petition "Say No to Industrial Solar Farms on Wirral's Greenbelt." You can find this petition on change.org and put in the keyword Thurstaston, and please sign our petition. And finally, just to round up, this is pristine, unspoilt greenbelt land. The function of this greenbelt land for centuries has been to grow food for local people. We have to unite together, stand strong, and say no to this industrial complex.